Welcome
We're
to
starting another show. We've never done anything like
No, we
exciting
have
like that.
never done that before.
I didn't
There's a
mean to scare
reason.
you.
Welcome to
Did
another.
you like that?
I liked it. Welcome to another episode of Standup Memories. This is Jackie Martling. I'm Peter Bales, and we are with comedy manager, producer, everything you can think of, extraordinaire Rory Rosegarten from the Conversation Company Limited.
He's right there.
And he manages comedians and the best comedians and knows everything about how to do it and can clear up a lot of confusion out there about what a manager is, what's the difference between a manager and an agent, and why managers can make or break careers, quite frankly, in a good way.
I don't know.
40 years we've all known each other.
I've known him.
I've known you,
A little over 40
a little
years.
over 40 years. Yeah. I've known you
For a long,
yeah,
long
for about
time.
40
Yeah,
years.
about 40
Yeah.
years.
So,
Yes.
I will try and make this short.
You've never made anything short in your life.
I started booking, my future ex-wife and I started booking Governor's Comedy Shop when it began in September of 1981. And I booked the shows, I hosted all the shows, and I was allowed to go on the road 1 week a month, but I hosted all 4 shows, all weekends. And we had me and 4 comedians. And you'd book them in advance. And in those days, there was no place to work. You know, there was the East Side Comedy Club. I don't even know if Chuckles existed yet. It might have.
Yeah.
And there was the brokerage, but there was just virtually no place to work. And the comics wanted to work so badly, so you could book way in advance. So I had my book, my calendar, and I had Governors booked 3 months out at least. And one day they said, we don't want 4 comedians every week. We want 3 comedians every week. And I got these all booked. So I had to, like a surgeon, go in and extract and make that phone call and cancel your weekend, cancel your weekend. It was Sophie's choice, because most of the guys, we all knew each other, we were all friends. And one of the weekends, I had 2 guitar-playing comics. So I had to cancel one. And I called one of them, and he was pissed. And I said, this is nothing personal. It's completely out of my hands. They cut me back from 4 comics to 3. I have to cancel one person, and there are 2 guitar-playing comedians on the show, and I have to cancel you. And the guy was upset, and I tried to talk him down as much as I could. What could I do? Plus, I didn't really know him. I knew most of the guys I booked, but this guy I didn't really know. He had called me for a gig. At the time, just right about then I got to know you, but I didn't know a lot about you. And years later, I found out when I looked, because there would have been no reason for me to really check up and look, but maybe I knew it, but maybe it escaped me. My band did a song called the Pot Song in the 70s, and we recorded a 45 RPM single. And at the very end of the single, for no apparent reason, we go, and we do the Looney Tunes thing, and then that's all, folks. Cut to 1990, me and my wife make a CD called the Off Our Rockers Holiday Sampler. It had 1 Christmas song, and one of the songs on the CD was the Pot Song with that. I got a cease and desist letter from Warner Chappell saying it has come to our attention that you are using our, whatever it's called, our, not handicap, what's it called, our copyright to the tune, the copyright is Merrily We Roll Along, that was written by Eddie Cantor, and we own it, and you are to cease and desist and send us whatever royalties, blah, 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 blah. And I look, and the guy who wrote the letter and started my problem was this guy, Brian Gary. And it turned out that Rory had produced a
musical.
one-man show.
No, a full-blown musical called Late Night Comic, written by Brian
Written
Gary.
by
and
Brian
me.
Gary
Yeah.
and this guy. Meanwhile, what's great about the story is we sold 12 of those
Yeah,
CDs.
yeah.
I mean, they must have thought we're on the Howard Stern show, everything turns to $1 billion. No money at all. I actually had to go in and remaster it and chop out the Merrily We Roll Along part. And then a year later, I met a guy named Lee Newman, who was also the grandson of Eddie Cantor, and he works with Warner Chappell because his grandfather did Sunny Side of the Street and all these great songs. He said it would have been no problem, but it had already been through all the changes. And then Brian Gary was his cousin.
know,
So the
funny.
whole small world.
How does that connect up to all the acts that you had to cut from the 4-person show to the 3-person show?
Because he was one of the guys. He was.
Oh.
He was
There
that.
you go.
I didn't. I thought that was good.
No,
He
there's a-
was the guitar player who I
have to
canceled.
say, I have to say that is the most boring story I've ever heard.
It is so interesting. I bet if you called him right now, he'd still be pissed. If he's still alive.
The only saving grace
and I
is
hope he's not.
Rory used to handle Eddie Cantor. You're
Yeah,
lucky.
right.
We have a connection
I'm old
there.
enough, yeah.
Yeah, he's old enough.
Yeah.
I love it. This is so great. I mean,
I got to ask you,
Yes.
was he a good guy?
It was fine. He was fine.
He wasn't a good guy. My friend
we're
Lee
getting
said he gets
personal
along
here.
with none of the family.
Yeah, he was fine.
I want to mention one of Rory's clients. Everybody watching or listening, I bet there's someone in your life that you got to call, you want to have lunch, you want to hang out, you want to catch up. And for me, that person is Joe Bolster. And a friend back in the day, we've been through the trenches together, longtime client of yours and friend.
Yes.
Can you free associate on the subject of Joe Bolster? I see him on Facebook. He's coaching a girls' track team.
Yes, track
he
team.
loved track. He
Yes,
used to make me
yes.
run in
He
Riverside
was a
Park.
long distance runner.
He
yes.
was.
Yes.
He was.
First of all, he is, I would easily say, the smartest guy I've met ever. I never saw a guy who knows so much about so much, and it's all correct and all accurate. He is a 45 singles, forget it.
Yep.
He knows every A side, B side, who sang it.
Didn't he go to Yale or
He went. No,
Denison.
Princeton?
Denison.
Denison
Denison,
University.
yes.
His father was involved with Princeton. He
Okay,
worked at
okay,
Princeton,
that's
yeah. He was a great comedian. He's a great guy, funny, very sweet guy too. Really
Absolutely.
sweet.
Joe Bolster,
So
Google
just-
him. He's
Yes,
tremendous.
yes, tremendous.
He's
A
A
absolutely
couple of weeks
tremendous.
ago, I told him a story. In the very beginning, not this, you heard this already, but in the very beginning, it was the Wild West comedy. And Jim Balatzos booked
Yes,
me and
Balatzos.
Paul Reiser and Joe Bolster
Yep.
to do a show
Yep.
at a bowling alley.
Yep.
And we showed up at the bowling alley, and it was closed. And while he's up there knocking on the door, realizing it's closed, I turned to Joe and Paul and said, "You know we get paid." And they said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "We're here. We're here ready to do our job. He's the producer. We get paid." And Reiser, I think, said, "You do the talking."
Yeah.
And Balatzos got back in the car and said, "You know, we get paid for this." And it was like
Yeah.
a line in the sand back then, because it was like, "Hey, there's no show. Nobody gets any money."
Yeah,
And we got our money. That-
Yeah, but
you know.
people also, you have to realize that comedians who are working comedians, who aren't playing arenas and theaters and playing little joints in clubs, they live on that money.
Right.
You're going to work on a Saturday night, you get there and the club is closed. That's income. You don't get that Saturday night.
But also the problem is, if you butt heads with him,
Yeah.
the
Then
odds of
you don't
him,
work.
he's not
Yeah,
going
it's
to
not
use
gonna
it.
use it again.
So it's
Yeah.
it's always a
Yeah.
fine
That's a
line.
great story. Joe Bolster, one of 12 children.
Yes. Yes.
And
I
every-
never knew that. I was-
Yes.
The
Everybody's
oldest of 12.
the oldest of 12, and you're formed by your upbringing, of course.
Yes.
And
All the brothers and sisters look alike.
amazing.
I'm not kidding.
Amazing.
That's great.
Yeah.
One time
The
at a
girls
dime.
look like the
Do you
guys.
know my life? I think I've gotten 2 or 3 Christmas cards from a comic in my entire 40 years, and
He's one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he said,
It was so we weren't close.
yeah,
and
but
it was like
Merry Christmas, you owe me $50.
Right. Right.
So at a diner, I took a French fry off his plate, and he kind of reacted
Yes,
like that. And I
yes.
said, "Why'd you react like that?" And he spoke to me about growing up with 11 siblings, and the fact that his father might come home with a dozen donuts, and food was an issue. I found it so fascinating.
Yes.
Anyway, so everybody out there, call that friend that you've been meaning to call and
Yeah,
get together.
yeah, it's true.
That's a good thing to remember. I want to ask.
Wait, I want to tell you that my theory.
Oh,
about
yes, your theory.
The podcast thing. You know,
refresh them what
okay, so we were talking about podcasts, and we were talking about doing them, and
How often?
and
How
how long
long?
they should be. My theory, and I spoke with someone about this. I won't say who it was, but a very high up podcast person. Doing a podcast is one thing. Listening to it is something else.
Yes.
Joe Rogan does a podcast. Tom Green did it. 4 hours. And Tom Green, so did you hear it? I said I listened to an hour. I don't have 4 hours to give to
Right.
a podcast. And
But who does?
Therein lies the rub, my opinion. Podcasts shouldn't be longer than 15, 20 minutes.
Here,
Because
here.
The average guy can't listen longer than 15 to 20 minutes. So when they do a podcast that's 90 minutes, what listener has 90 minutes to listen to a podcast?
And if you want more, you listen to another.
Correct,
Just like the
correct,
cable shows.
correct.
They're making them shorter and shorter.
Correct.
All of a sudden it's over and it says
Correct.
next one starts in 3 seconds, 2 seconds.
Correct.
You stay right there.
Exactly.
That's a challenge when one of Jackie's stories is 37 minutes.
Unless
That's
it's
a
a great
short
one like the Brian Gary show.
That's a short story.
That's a short
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
I love it.
You know that'll come back at you.
It will.
Yeah,
There's
okay.
plenty of time, and it'll
all
come
right.
back to me in spades,
Yeah.
by the way.
You know, speaking of going on, they asked me to do something here, and this place is great. You haven't seen the green room probably
No.
yet. I mean, it's just this great guy, Mike Cave, made himself some money, and he always wanted a media company. Now he's got this media company, and they wanted me to do something. They do a podcast. I said, all right, and I'm not going to sit there and say, hey, how you doing? You know, it's me. I'd love to get Peter to be my first guest and talk to him. It'd be interesting.
Be great.
And we sat there, and I said, we should do this. We did 20 shows before we had a guest. And then you're the 3rd guest. So
I'm very
talk
honored.
about going on and on, you know. But and we've fallen more into the, he's smarter and smarter, and I'm more and more of a jerk. And that's, I guess, how these things, you always wonder, like
Isn't
when
it
Abbott
great- isn't it
met
great?
Costello.
Wait a second. Isn't it great in your life that you've contributed to comedy and you finally hit the peak where you're the biggest jerk?
I'll take it. I'll take it.
That's a compliment, by the way.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely.
But how do they, like, Abbott meets Costello?
I
It's
know.
like, you're going to be the little stupid one.
You know, it's
and I'm gonna be-
amazing. People don't know. I'm breaking the bank right now. I'm telling you. This is one of the sweetest, nicest guys. Lovely, caring.
Abbott or Costello?
You asshole.
You don't curse on my show.
I'm sorry, I
It's
said
Peter's
asshole.
show. He cursed on Peter's show.
Yeah.
That's very nice to say.
And Rory,
Yes.
you'll agree with this. People who know Jackie from Howard Stern and from his live shows, the best joke teller on the planet.
The best.
This is showing a new side of Jackie, this podcast. Absolutely.
Yes.
Then why you act like I'm a jerk?
'Cause
Well,
you are.
You are. Thank you. He
but-
said it first.
We've had so much fun. I mean, we just go on and on and on, you know. But you do find 40 minutes, 60 minutes, 20 minutes is a sweet spot. You can stop and start off.
I agree with you. That's the
just-
sweet
you
spot.
just reset.
It's also, again, if you go back to what we've been talking about, in the past, it's hard to be funny and it's hard to be good. And it always made me crazy that you had to fill time.
Yes.
Comedians can't just fill time. They can be humorous, they can be funny, but their material is so carefully crafted. A guy runs out. It happens.
You could be funny and et cetera, but being interesting is a whole nother,
Yes. It's also a hell of a thing to think that the listener has time to listen to you and your crap. Like they want to hear.
Do you really want a listener that
right.
has an hour to listen to you?
No.
I want a guy that can only handle 20 minutes because he's got to get somewhere.
And but there lies the rub, because
I'm not trying to chase you.
with the podcast, it's still business. The longer it's on, the more commercials get sold, the more spot. We get that. But again, I go to the same thing, that if the quality is there and it's a good thing, it doesn't have to. Long doesn't make it good. Good makes it good. So if a guy can do a podcast and it's 10 minutes 3 times a week, but it's great.
Well, we really do need to fill a little time. So starting next week, we're going to do happy birthdays.
I have something.
Because the highlight of my life was when I was like 6 years old, and the merry mailman said, "Happy birthday, Jackie." And
You were never 6 years old.
and never dawned on me, there were probably 80 Jackies.
And some of you might remember the magic mirror on Romper Room. That's the same thing that Jackie's talking about. Yeah. Now, we have a lot of comedians who
I'm
watch.
going to admit that was after my time.
That was after. Romper Room was after his time. Actually, Jackie
don't
performed in a monastery. Opening for
we were talking about the
Gregorian
Mets and the
chants.
Yankees. I was never a Met fan because when I was a kid, there were no Mets.
There were no Mets. Yeah.
1962,
Right.
I think it was.
1962.
I was already in 8th grade.
Yep.
One of the kids in my class, his father was part owner of Doubleday.
Doubleday.
It's like, wow.
Yes. Rory.
Let ignore him because
help me out here.
Yes.
A lot of comedians watch this podcast, and I tell them this, but maybe they'll believe it if you say it. They think they're competing against other comedians.
No.
I tell them each comedian is an individual, each career is individual.
Correct.
You are not on a time schedule that you have to match somebody else.
Nope.
Please, I know you know that.
You couldn't be more right, and I know Jackie will vouch for this too, that the comedians are not competing with each other. Oh, they may be competing for stage time or whatever, but they're not competing. The trick, in my opinion, to being a good comedian is to be different from everybody else, to have your point of view be the point of view that they grab onto. There were comedians, when I started out, comedians literally were ripping off other comedians and doing their material. All right, anybody can do a joke. I could do one of Jackie's jokes, but I'm not Jackie. I can't do it like Jackie with the spirit of Jackie because I'm not that person.
Right.
So to be a good comedian, you have to do what makes you funny, what makes you laugh. That's what makes the comedy work.
It makes it special.
Makes it special, makes it work. And no, you're not competing with other comedians.
Be true to yourself.
Yes.
Something very, in the very beginning, well, the beginning of what's relative to me or whatever, like 1979 or something, I wasn't in the city a lot, but there was so much of that accusations that you stole my bit.
Right.
You stole my bit. And somebody say, you stole my Star Wars bit. And it's like, if 30 people watch Star Wars that are comedians, you're going to get X amount of...
Well, it's called parallel development.
Parallel development.
Yeah.
But people were all up each other's noses about this. And I actually wrote a letter, and they posted it on the board at the Improv, because I said, there's so much stuff that's been around forever. And speaking of Eddie Cantor, he was a comic, and all of a sudden they gave him a radio show. Right. And after 2 weeks, he was out of stuff. So we got writers, and the writers went and got old joke books and took
That's
jokes
right.
and made them
That's
fit
right.
Eddie Cantor.
So that anybody can do that.
So right, but the point is that everything's been done, so things are special. And I said, I was at a show once, and I'm not gonna say it was, but a guy got up and just told an old joke. But it's an old joke that I tell, and he told it exactly in my voice with the expressions and the timing and the you make it work
Right,
for you.
make it work for you.
And in my mind, that was as much stealing
It is
as
stealing.
taking your Star Wars.
Well,
pick,
but he
you
didn't
know.
steal the joke. He stole the. He
The
stole
persona.
delivery.
The persona. He
Right.
stole the persona. That is
Yeah.
stealing. You're absolutely right. But Milton Berle, I once saw an interview. How do you get started in comedy? He said, just steal some jokes and get going. He was wrong about that.
He was really, truly a miserable guy. He was the king of comedy. Ask him. I once saw him in Montreal at the Comedy Festival, and he was older then, and he was giving an interview. It was scheduled to give an interview, and he was telling the film crew where the light should go, where the camera
He
should.
reinvented the word bitter.
Yeah, he was not a.
And yet,
not
in
a
the
fan
very
of his.
early 50s on the Milton Berle show, Mr. Television had such ratings that when his show went to commercial, everybody went to the bathroom and flushed toilets.
That was a whole. That's
And
such a
New
great
York
story.
City had meetings about how concerned they were about a drop in water pressure, and the fire department was hindered in
He
putting
was a
out
great comedian, but if you ask people who knew him and
Yes.
who worked with him, he was a terrible guy.
Okay.
But he had like an 80 share, but it was the only
It was
show
80
on
share,
TV.
yeah, that's
the only
right.
show on TV.
Yeah.
Right.
And in 1954, I think it was, he was like the king of television. And by
Texaco Star Theater.
1955, he was hosting Jackpot
Yes,
Bowling.
yes, but he was the host of Texaco Star Theater.
And Rodney used to say that Milton Berle was unbelievable, and they said he stole so many jokes because he knew. He's like me; he knew every joke in the world.
You
and,
steal a million jokes.
yeah.
Yeah. All of a sudden he's deaf. Now we can't hear it.
No. Like he just knew them and
Yeah.
just rattled them and rattled them. But Rodney said he was so great, and I don't. Aside from seeing him dressed
Well-
up as a woman, he did a show in Catskills when we were up there with the Stern Show, and it was Milton Berle and Henny Youngman.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember because they came out at one point with bandanas and pigtails, and they
Right.
were both
Willie
Willie
Nelson.
Nelson. And it was
Yeah.
so. But he was supposed to be the
Yes.
quickest guy in the world, and he got heckled a few times. And he couldn't deal a comic that's been out of 6 months could have handled a heckler better than he
Well,
did.
I'll point out something. This is a manager thing, and it's a personal thing. I don't believe in being funny at all costs, meaning the audience, you're hysterical, but you're a prick. I have a very hard time with that. I think that comedians who are generally good guys, it comes through. I think
What I'm saying is what he did to calm the heckler down was mean.
Well,
Whatever
that's
he
what
said
I'm
was
saying.
mean.
Correct.
You
Correct.
know,
Now,
it was,
in fairness to him, there is no place in the world for a heckler.
No,
There's
there
no-
is not. And he's older, and if he hadn't garnered
Yes,
respect,
yes,
especially
yes.
in the Catskills.
It's very disrespectful, and the guy sitting to the right and the left, he didn't pay to hear this idiot who's drunk.
Right,
You,
right.
you have
Right.
my-
But two different kinds of hecklers. The hostile one, no excuse. But if a comedian is
No,
working in the audience, you know.
Byplay is
Right,
fine, and
right.
it's going somewhere, and
Right.
fine. I'm talking about a drunk,
Right.
or a guy who doesn't like you, doesn't like your politics. That that
changes the flavor of the room.
Yes, look, comedy has changed drastically, and it breaks my heart a little bit because comedy is fun. It's fun. Did you ever think you'd live in a time where Don Rickles couldn't work? Think about that for a minute. How crazy that is. Now, the one thing about Don Rickles, who was one of the best and really funny, he would, at the end of his show, the last 5 minutes of the show,
Yes.
very sincerely say, look,
Yes.
I'm making fun of everybody. I'm Jewish, you're not. We laugh. It doesn't matter.
He
You're
he
black.
sang a
I'm
song,
white.
I'm a nice
yes,
guy.
and the audience loved it. They loved it. Now, it's become a political thing.
Yeah.
Being a comedian, it's a political thing. Who cares? You can't
Right.
laugh at yourself
That-
now.
you know-
There's no more laughing at yourself. You have to get offended at a comedy show. That's all.
Agree.
That's where I
exclusive
come
to me.
from.
Agree totally. Times change, not always for the best.
Yes,
And this
yes.
has been, I hope you have been watching and listening to the wisdom of Rory Rosegarten, who's seen it all. So honored to
Sadly.
have you on the show. You are
Thank you.
terrific.
Thanks for having
Always
me.
have been.
Thank you.
And Jackie,
I have not cleared this with management, but we might just stop the cameras and then roll another one.
well, that would be pretty exciting. I have an ad lib from about 10 minutes ago, but you know it's hard on this show.
Throw it in.
He said Milton Berle was getting an 80% share on this big show in the early 50s. What Milton Berle would never tell you is that the 20% share was the test pattern.
Yeah.
But which is true.
It's crazy.
What a great ad lib 10 minutes ago. Thank you for indulging
No,
me.
that's great.
Again, thank you, Rory.
Thank you.
Rosegarten, The Conversation Company Limited. And check out their roster. It's everybody, boy.
As opposed to stand-up memories,
Stand-up Memories.
unlimited.
Unlimited. We are Stand-up Memories. And check us out at standupmemories.com. You already know that if you're watching. Jackie
I haven't
Martling.
told Peter, but next week's guest is Barack Obama, which is not bad.
It's funny.
Not bad.
All right, we're
I
trying.
have a joke. I heard a new joke, and I'm scared to ask my friend where he got it because I don't want it to be something that I shouldn't tell. The bartender says, "I'm sorry, we don't serve time travelers." A time traveler walks into a bar.
We will see you next time. Hey, a new episode of Stand-Up Memories every Wednesday.
How exciting is that?
Starring me, Peter Bales, and right here, Jackie the Joke Man Martling.
Please follow us on social media. Search it out. What is it? Me space?
MySpace,
Your space?
TikTok, Instagram, Facebook.
Doodah, doodah.